Good morning, everyone. I believe you're waiting for Hans at this moment. Then we'll get started.
Morning, Ashley.
Good morning, Mr. Stratton. Good morning, President Lee. All of the subcommittee members are logged in, so we are ready to start.
Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let me just pull up the agenda. Okay, and I don't know, actually, Ashley, are you doing the roll call?
Erin will be doing it.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize. Sorry, just saw that now, Erin. I apologize for that. So Erin, if you will go ahead and do the roll call.
Absolutely. President Lee?
Here.
Vice President Close?
Here.
Mr. Stratton?
Here.
President Lee, all members are present for the subcommittee.
Great, thank you so much, Erin. Okay, so opening statement.
At this time, Deborah Sterling will introduce herself to the board and her role at this hearing. So Deborah, if you're ready.
I'm ready. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning. My name is Deborah Sterling, and I am an Assistant Attorney General in the Education Unit. I will be the subcommittee's independent advisor for this hearing because Ms. Bergen will be representing the board staff position in this hearing. As an independent advisor, my role will be to advise you on the matter specific to the consideration and actions taken at this hearing. The specific issue is whether the evidence is presented by the board staff proves by a preponderance of the evidence that Victory High School failed to comply with the terms and conditions of the consent agreement. Generally, a preponderance of the evidence is defined as more likely than not, or more probable than not. If the subcommittee wishes for me to provide any legal advice appropriate for an executive session, then you can do the appropriate motion and staff can send us into an executive room by ourselves. If the committee has any questions, please feel free to ask. Unless there are any questions at this point in time, I will, I guess, go silent. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. I will be here. Just feel free to ask at any time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Vicki, is that our only introductory statement? Perfect. Okay.
Yes, I didn't.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay.
Yeah, that's all we're going to have for introductory statements. The opening statements will be made during each party's presentation.
Sure. Okay, thanks. Okay, then go ahead and moving right on to the oaths. And I believe, Vicki, you're going to handle that portion.
Did you receive the oath? I was going to have you do it as chairperson.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, I thought, I was like, cool, that sounds fine. Absolutely. Yes, I apologize. Yeah. Let me pull that up. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We'll just need to have any party that is anybody that's representing a party or that it will be answering questions, asking questions of the board members or answering questions from board members will need to take the oath. Therefore, once President Lee is finished with the oath, if you'll unmute yourself and respond.
Okay, so I can say it one time and then just have every party that needs to respond. Is that correct, Vicki?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry about that. I totally misunderstood. Okay, all right, guys. So here's the oath. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? At this time, if you could please unmute yourself, and I will go ahead and, just so it's not chaos on Zoom, maybe go through the parties involved, and Vicki will let me know, or Debbie can let me know if I've missed anybody. And so Vicki, we'll start with you.
I do.
Okay. Victory High School. If all of your representatives could go ahead and attest to the oath, I would appreciate that.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Board member Ashley? Does she need to do that? Okay. And I see Rachel's on the line, so we'll go ahead. Rachel?
I do.
Joanna?
I do.
I see Mary is on.
I do.
Awesome. Alexis?
I do.
Serena?
I do.
Great. And do we need to do the board members?
No, we do not need to do board members.
Oh, no. Okay.
No.
Perfect. Okay. Then I think we're finished.
Okay. All right. So just to highlight the process of the meeting today, first, I will be presenting board staff's position regarding the findings on the breach of contract, after which time board members, subcommittee members may ask questions either of myself or Victory. Then after that, Victory will have its opportunity to present. And then following that, there will be another opportunity for subcommittee members to ask questions, anything of either party. And then once the deliberations and questions are done, the subcommittee will make a motion regarding determining whether Victory has reached its consent agreement and a recommendation regarding disciplinary action. The subcommittee's motion and decision will then be taken up with the full board at a later date for a final decision. Any questions on the process? No. Okay. Okay, so if Joanna, you will share the screen for me. Thank you. Okay, in preparation for this hearing, I created a small PowerPoint just to help board members and any staff member follow along with the various breaches that we have observed. So if you please go to the next slide. Okay, first of all, I'm going to give you just a brief history background of Victory High School and how we came to be where we are today. Originally, Victory High School received its original charter in July of 1996. So it's been in existence actually for around 25 years now. Then in July 1st of 2010, they renewed the charter for an additional 20 years. Currently, Victory High School operates one school, Victory High School West Campus, and it serves grades 9 through 12 and is located in Phoenix. The most recent ADM count, which would have been as of April 7th, 2021, Victory reported an ADM of 21.861. So that gives board members an idea of the size of the school, how long it's been in existence, and the students that it serves. As a history, a background of how we got here today, in March of 2019, Victory High School received a letter grade of F for fiscal year 2018. As a result, they came before the board and were put on what's called a letter grade consent agreement, which the terms include that they must receive a letter grade other than F for the following 3 fiscal years, meaning fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20, and fiscal year 21. So at this time, the board has determined or deemed that this particular consent agreement has been fulfilled because, as we all know with the COVID situation, the statewide assessments were canceled for FY20, and schools were given the same letter grade that they had received in FY19. So the grade they got in FY19 is what they're going to get in FY20. There've also been legislation passed that prohibits AD from assigning a school letter for FY21. So we will be no new letter grade for 20, no new letter grade for 21. Since this particular consent agreement goes through fiscal year 21, the board has deemed that Victory has fulfilled the terms of that letter grade consent agreement. Therefore, that agreement is no longer has been fulfilled and is no longer an issue in this matter. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay. Now back in 2019, Victory High School received an overall rating when the board did its operational performance ratings of does not meet the board's operational performance standards. It received this rating because 6 of the 9, there are 9 operational performance measures. 6 of the 9 received does not meet. The 6 that received does not meet included the essential terms of the charter, would be the first measure, and they received a does not meet due to the program of instruction was not aligning with the program of instruction that was represented in the charter contract. So when board staff went out there and did their observations, did their review, they observed that the program of instruction that was currently being implemented at that time was not the same as had been represented in the charter contract. Also, the second one, they received a does not meet for operational reporting and compliance. They had failed to upload information. Schools are required to upload information regarding attendance to ADE so that ADE can then make a comparison with the school's computerized attendance system to see if the schools are reporting appropriately. By failing to upload that information, they were unable to make that determination and therefore received a does not meet. They also had some enrollment policies that violated state statute and rule at that time. And the third measure was that they failed to maintain a safe environment consistent with state and federal law. This issue came up in that they had failed to provide valid fingerprint clearance cards for 2 employees, which is considered a safety issue. And they were also unable to provide the educational teaching background experience for 12 instructional staff members. Schools are required to have in file and available for parents or any public inspection, all educational and teaching background and experience and resumes in file, ready and available for inspection by the public. They also failed to be transparent in their operations by violating the open meeting laws. And they also failed to be transparent by not keeping their board members that on the Arizona Corporation Commission in line with what had been approved by the board and was then currently listed on the ASBCS online system. So their board members were out of alignment between the Corporation Commission and what the board had approved at the time. They also failed to comply with timely submission requirements. Schools are required when they go through an inter-review or receive a complaint or any other issues, if they are given a deadline in which they need to submit documentation or evidence of compliance to board staff. Board staff provides a deadline and they are required by rule to reply by that specified deadline. In this instance, the school failed to do that. And then lastly, they had failed to post teacher salary information as required by law. State law requires that all schools prominently post on the homepage of their website 4 different areas: the average teacher salary, the average increase in salary, there's 4 different areas that they need to post, and they did not do that. So therefore, they came before the board for failing to meet the operational performance framework. At that time, the board decided that in lieu of issuing a notice of intent to revoke, which is one of the options they have, and going before OA for a revocation, the board instead decided to issue a consent agreement in which the school was given terms that they had to comply with to make sure they came back into compliance with these 6 measures and to ensure that they continued in compliance with these 6 measures. And that consent agreement was drafted, was signed by Victory High School, and also approved by the board. So, Jonah, can you go to the next slide? Okay. Well, actually, that particular consent agreement was approved by the board at that February 10th, 2020 board meeting. The consent agreement, like I said, included specific monitoring terms that were to continue through FY22. And one of the paragraph 73 of that consent agreement states that if a charter school fails to comply with the consent agreement, the board may hold a hearing to consider and to determine whether a breach has occurred, and also to recommend disciplinary action. At their last 5-year interval review, board staff did observe that there are 4 breaches, 4 non-compliance issues that were included in that consent agreement. Therefore, they were in breach of that consent agreement during that February 2021 interval review. Victory was then brought before the board on May 10th to determine if the full board wanted to hold a hearing to determine whether they had violated or breached the consent agreement and what the recommended decision should be. That's why that leads us up to where we are today, and that the recommended decision made by the subcommittee today will go back before the full board for final decision. One thing I want to note before we go any farther, that schools normally come before the board due to non-compliance with the operational performance frameworks out of an interval review, absent a consent agreement. In this case, this particular school, Victory, is now coming to you for violating or breaching that consent agreement. At the interval review, there are other non-compliance measures that are not part of that consent agreement, which we are not dealing with today. Today, we are simply dealing with those measures that were included in that February consent agreement and whether those have been breached. So this is basically a hearing based on a breach of a contract, as opposed to just your normal interval review. Okay, do anyone go next slide? Thanks. Okay, under the terms of the agreement, failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the consent agreement is deemed to be a breach of the contract. A breach of a contract occurs at the time that it's breached, regardless of any action taken afterward. I bring this up because this standard is consistent with what the board does when it's reviewing a school based on a performance framework outside of a consent agreement. If a charter school comes before the board due to an internal review, setting aside that any consent agreement, they get 3 different ratings. One being a meets, which means the charter holder demonstrates compliance with all metrics and measures. Or they can receive a does not meet. And this means that the charter holder has failed to comply, but they then have demonstrated remedies that have resulted in compliance. So therefore, if a charter school is not in compliance and then takes steps to bring itself into compliance after that review, they still receive that does not meet. However, if they are out of compliance and then do not take steps to bring themselves back into compliance, they drop down to a falls far below. So the only way that a charter school can actually get a meets and actually meet the standards is if they are in compliance at the time of the review. If they do bring themselves into compliance later on, they get a does not meet. If they don't do anything afterwards, they get a falls far below. This is consistent with the what we're looking at today under a breach of contract. We're looking at the breach of the contract at the time of the breach, and that contract is still deemed to be in breach, even if the school has taken steps afterwards. They still breach the contract, just as if they were under a normal or regular interval review, absent a contract, they would still be found to not meet, even if they took measures later on to bring themselves back into compliance. Okay. Next slide. Okay. Now I'm going to go through the 4 different breaches that board staff observed. I've presented a table for each one to help you kind of follow along and keep these straight and organized. In the first column I'm going to present to you the actual consent agreement term. The next column lists the statutes or rules that support the reason for putting that term into the consent agreement. So these terms all have support in statute or in rule. Okay. The next column sets forth what the board staff's findings were. And then I'll talk about a little bit about what the evidence and what they found that led them to find that there was a breach. Okay, so let's talk about the first one. The first one is found in paragraph 62 of our consent agreement, in which, according to administrative rule, the charter holder is required to submit amendment requests to the board through ASBCS online whenever proposing changes to a charter. So if a charter school would like to make a change to its charter, it is required to submit that amendment request to board staff, and then it needs to be approved by the board before any change can take place. That particular term is supported by our rule by Arizona Administrative Code R75303, which first requires consent of the board and requires the charter holder to submit amendment request. It states that the charter holder shall not act contrary to the original terms without obtaining board's approval first. And lastly, the reason we're here is because there was a change to the mission statement. And D6 of that rule specifically mentions that any change to a charter's mission statement must go through that amendment and approval process prior to putting that change in place. Okay. Now, what happened here is that when board staff went out and did their interval review, they reviewed the mission statements, both what the board has in their system online that was submitted and approved by the board, and also what is on the school's website. When board staff did this, they noticed that the mission statement online and approved by the board was not in alignment with what the school had on its website. Thank you. So I'll read very quickly what board staff found online, and what was approved by the board is the following mission statement. Victory High School is a group of citizens concerned for the future of Arizona students. Our mission is A, to offer 9th through 12th grade level curriculum, which will improve student achievement. B, to provide a systematic program in math, science, and technology. C, to graduate students recognized for academic achievement who possess, I need to take a quick pause up because my computer says it's running out of power. So I'm going to make sure it's plugged in. Hold on just a second and make sure that it's plugged in.
Vicki, you are muted.
There, okay. For some reason, my computer somehow became unplugged and was going to shut down on us. So that would not be good. So Joanna, can you take us back to the slide that I was on?
I believe it may have been Joanna's computer that was running out of battery.
Oh, it could have been. It showed up. I thought it was mine, but yeah, she just said hers is booting up. So
hold on.
I was worried it was mine.
Vicki, just a point of clarification for this process, or as the subcommittee, should we really just wait to ask questions once the entire presentation is done versus stopping, because that could interfere on your time? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Deborah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deborah. I apologize. I'm so sorry, Deborah. Should we?
Yes. It is very hard. I'm in Vicki's position in other meetings, and so I understand. But it is helpful to try to keep the distinction. At this point, Ms. Bergen is a party and not providing advice to the subcommittee. On your agenda, you put in that you would let them do their presentation, and then the committee would ask questions. I think for clarity for the public that it'd be best to follow the agenda.
Perfect. Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
That's fine. Any questions? No problem.
We're back. Okay. So I just read to you the mission statement that had been approved by the board at that renewal contract time. When board staff looked at the school's website, the mission statement stated on that website was that the mission was to prepare students to succeed in a changing world. Obviously, there is a non-alignment. There is a difference in those two mission statements, which required the school to submit an amendment request prior to and get approval prior to actually changing that mission. Okay. We can go on to the second breach. Okay. The second breach, the term in the consent agreement states that school personnel, they must ensure the school personnel have been properly fingerprinted. Fingerprinting requirements are set forth in ARS 15183, and they must maintain documentation supporting the proper fingerprinting throughout the date of the current charter. So charter schools are expected to know the fingerprinting requirements and to adhere to those at all times and to maintain documentation of appropriate fingerprinting. As I just said, the fingerprinting process is set forth in statute as law. And it states under 183C5 that individuals engaged in instructional work must have a valid fingerprint clearance card. The one exception to this is if the person is a volunteer or a guest speaker and they're accompanied by an individual who does have a valid fingerprint clearance card. All other personnel must be fingerprint checked pursuant to 15.5.12. There is a little bit difference in the fingerprinting that teachers need to get or instructional staff needs to get versus other personnel, such as someone working in the cafeteria or other positions. There is a slight difference in what they need to get. Instructional staff must have a fingerprint clearance card. Other personnel go through a process where there is a fingerprint check. It's just a little shorter process than the actual full clearance card. And 15106 talks about some individuals need to not get just a fingerprint clearance. There's different levels or different types of fingerprint clearance cards. 15106 states that some individuals need to get what's called an identity verified fingerprint card, or an IVP. An IVP goes through a background check, but they also go through verification of their identity. They have to submit documentation of their identity. So it's just another level of clearance. And if you notice, 106 does state that if you have to be fingerprint checked pursuant to 15.5.12, you must have that IVP. 15.5.12 talks about non-certificated staff or personnel, and they needed to be fingerprint checked, which is just a different level of background. But under 106, they also have to have that identity verification. So anyone that is certified or non-certified that are working with students must have that additional level of identity verification. The finding when board did their review was that one staff member did not have a IVP or identity verified fingerprint clearance card. So they did not have an IVP FCC. And when you're working with students and you're doing instructional staff, you are required to have that IVP verification. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit under evidence of breach, board staff's observations. So prior to doing their actual interval desk review, they requested that Victory submit documents that they needed to review pursuant to that interval review. Part of those documents revealed that the FCC for one instructional staff member was not an IVP. Okay, that makes them now in violation of ARS 15.106 and the other fingerprint statutes. Board staff at their interval desk review meeting with Victory on February 3rd asked if that staff member worked with students. And Victory replied that they did and didn't provide any other information at that point. Therefore, board staff provided Victory with an opportunity for the 4 hours after the meeting on February 3rd to provide evidence of that IVP clearance card. Victory on that date, they did supply the documentation within that 4-hour window. However, what they submitted was for an IVP card. Joanna, are you able to share the fingerprint document, the application? Well, there's 2 documents I'd like to see under the fingerprint folder. Can you?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to stop sharing this and then share.
Okay.
The other. So give me a second.
Okay.
Okay. No problem. Let's see. We are on. Okay. So I'm going back to this one.
Yes, I believe we're on slide 7.
Mm-hmm.
That helps.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Boards, in addition, board staff did have an additional conversation with Victory on April because they have a time limit to get this information in. We still want to make sure that they're submitting all documents of compliance. So board staff often reaches out to the school to discuss any issues that are outstanding or that they see a concern about, or they want to verify that their assessment is correct. During that call, Victory stated that this particular staff member, although not a certified teacher or in a teacher position, she's the only Spanish-speaking staff member at the school. So some of her roles, as we understood it, or we were informed, is she assists many of the students are Spanish-speaking. This was also during the COVID time. So she also was the one to deliver learning packets to the students at their home, which particularly if they were Spanish-speaking students would be, very beneficial to them. In doing that, she's then working with students and actually in more of an instructional role requiring her to have that IVP then Two Victories benefit. They did actually submit a current IVP fingerprint clearance card on May 17th. So they were out of compliance at the time of our review. They have brought themselves into compliance after that. So that is a positive. But we do need to remember that we need schools to stay in compliance at all times, particularly since board staff often goes out once every couple years or once every 5 years. They are not, monitoring schools on a daily basis. They are not staffed to do that. So we need to ensure and make sure that schools are in compliance at all times. And then if they come out of compliance, they can take action to come back in compliance, but then that is a consideration for the board when they're deciding their disciplinary action. Can we go on to the third slide? Or the third breach? Okay. The third breach deals with the open meeting laws, which goes to the transparency of a school. The performance framework ensures that schools are maintaining transparency, that they are transparent in their operations as they are public institutions that are utilizing public money and being entrusted with the education of our students. So we need to make sure that they are transparent and open. ARS, if you look on the left side, is the consent agreement term. And under the open meeting law, requires that any public entity, any particularly schools, or even us, that in our meeting, our minutes of our meeting, that we have certain elements. And in our agendas, we provide certain elements in order to provide the public with appropriate notice of what's occurred. Sorry. Some of those requirements are you need to include the date, time, and place of your meeting. You have to put in what board members were present, who was absent. You have to have a description of the matters that were discussed or considered. You need to have a description of the actions that were taken, the motions that were made, and also the names of any persons that are making statements or presenting material to allow the public to have full open observation of the workings of the board. These requirements are supported by statute and are required by statute, which I've listed in that second column. I won't read those down to you, but each one of those individual subsections goes to one of our violations, either date or time or place. The third column, which is the finding and the breach that was observed by board staff. Then they do their interval review. They go through and look at all the board minutes, the school's board minutes, their agendas, making sure that the school is staying in compliance and being transparent. The meeting minutes, they found violations in 4 instances, the October 3rd, 2019, June 18th, 2020, July 6th, 2020, and October 1st, 2020. And then they also found violations in the agendas. Also, I won't read them all, but also for those 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 agendas. Let's talk a little bit about what was observed. If you look in the the very right column, first is the minutes. And I've listed for you the violations for each one of those. So for the first one, for those particular 3 minutes, the June 18th, July 6th, and October 1st, the school failed to record the members as present or absent. And it is required that all members be recorded as present or absent so that the public is aware of who's at the meeting and who is making motions, who is attending. They failed to do that in those 3 minutes. They also failed to record board member votes on their October 1st, 2020 minutes. And that is also required because the public needs to know, and it has the right to know, how board members are voting and how each individual board member voted on a specific action. They also failed to state the motions that were made in the October 3rd, June 18th, July 6th, and October 1st minutes that are listed there. That is required in order to give full public disclosure of the matters that the board is considering and the motions that they made, the decisions that they made, so the public is aware of what the board is doing. They also failed to include the meeting time on the June 18th minutes. Meeting time is important as obviously as a notification to the public of when meetings will occur or have occurred. Also in their agendas, they also failed to state the time and place on those agendas that I've listed on those dates. This is particularly important because the public is entitled to attend, listen, and hear any discussions held by the board and to observe what is going on. If they do not know the state, they do not know the time and place, obviously it is not, they're not able to do that, and we're not fulfilling our transparency requirement. They also failed to align their board minutes with their agenda items that on those particular agendas and minutes, making it difficult for the public to reconcile what motions were made regarding what agenda items. Again, another important point for transparency and full disclosure and observation by the public. Okay. And with during our question time, if you need to or you'd like to look at some of those minutes or agendas, we can pull those up. Let's go to the fourth breach. Okay, this is our fourth and last breach. In this one, paragraph 70 requires that charter schools timely submit all requested documentation of compliance by the date specified by board staff. This is also set forth in rule that after receiving a notice of non-compliance, the charter shall provide written notice demonstrating compliance has been addressed by a specified date, that date being set by board staff. It's important to have prompt response so we can make sure that schools are complying and what action they're taking to come back into a compliance. The finding was that they did not submit documentation requested by the board staff by a specified deadline. If we look at the evidence, we discussed this a little earlier about the, they had a deadline of 4 p.m. on February 3rd to submit documentations of compliance. They were, in addition to what we talked about, the fingerprint clearance card and the IVP card, they were also required to submit the board minutes to verify and check for those items that were not in alignment or violated statute. They failed to do that for both two of the board minutes. They did submit some, because as you can recall from our previous slide, there were several minutes and agendas that the board looked at and found violations, but all were submitted except for these two. And these two were not submitted until March 17th, 2021, which is actually 42 days late from their due date. So they were found to have breached that term of their consent agreement. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we've walked through the 4 breaches. I'd like to go through for the subcommittee's review. Those of you who've been on the board for a while are aware of these, but I'd like to go through for review and for the record. It is set forth in rule the oversight actions that are available to the board. They include, but are not limited, the board does have discretion to determine what would be the appropriate action to take with a particular school. But here are the ones that are listed in rule that they may consider. The first is imposing civil penalties. This is a penalty and it's specifically set out for fingerprint violations. So this is not a disciplinary action that would be applicable in this case. We are looking at we could impose a civil penalty, but we're looking more at a violation of the consent agreement at this point. You could also withhold 10% of the monthly state aid until the charter school or the charter holder brings itself into compliance. At the time, however, at the time that they do come into compliance, that state aid is then returned to them. So they don't lose I've had that question before, they don't lose that funding, but it is withheld until they come into compliance. Once they come into compliance to the satisfaction of the board, that state aid is returned to them. The board can also issue a notice of intent to revoke. And this is not a case in which you would be doing that. That is a case in which we do not have a consent agreement. And the decision is to revoke based purely on a review, and that would go before OA. But due to the fact that this is due to a consent agreement, you would not be issuing the notice of intent to revoke. Our action here today is in essence the notice of intent to revoke. So that has already been issued. So board subcommittee can also recommend revoking the charter, or they can also enter into another consent agreement to ensure compliance. This particular school has already had 2 consent agreements, the F agreement we talked about earlier, and then the agreement that we are here for today. But it is purely within the discretion of the subcommittee and the full board, which of those actions that they think is appropriate for the school. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay. Now, these are the factors that are in rule. Rule lists factors that the board members can consider when they're trying to determine what kind of disciplinary action they should take. So if you do determine that this school has breached its consent agreement, there are some factors that you are to consider. And I'd like to go through each one of these, and I'm going to relate it to what we've seen with the school victory in this case. First, you need to consider, was there a threat to the health and safety of children? That goes to that fingerprinting issue. It's very important, and it is very well imposed or implemented that schools get those fingerprint clearance cards. It is for the safety of the students. We do not want someone in working with students who later on we find to have had some sort of history that it would not be safe for our students to be working with those individuals, particularly alone in an instructional environment. I would like to note that this fingerprint breach that we have today, the term of the consent agreement came about because of prior violations of fingerprint statutes. So there have been prior violations of fingerprint statute, which brought us to the reason for the consent agreement we're looking at today. And we've again found a breach of that fingerprint requirement since them signing that February consent. Next, you can look at whether the charter holder's historical compliance record indicates repeated or multiple breaches of the provisions of the charter or any other contractual agreement. That would be our consent agreement here. So one consideration that board members may look at is the history. Has this school in the past had repeated violations? Have they had multiple breaches of the same provision? One factor to think about when you're considering, one thing to think about when you're considering that particular factor is that, as I mentioned, this particular school has had two consent agreements now, and then it's bringing up for the board for violating the terms of the consent agreement. So our February consent agreement, we already had violations, very much similar to the ones we saw earlier. And now they have violated those again under the consent agreement. Ones that happened in both instances is the fingerprinting issue, open meeting laws, maintaining the essential terms of the contract. In this instance, it was the mission statement. In the September instance where it led to this agreement, they were out of compliance with their program of instruction. So those are things that the board needs to consider when looking at disciplinary action. Whether its charter has failed to meet the minimum academic performance expectations. Now, the terms of the consent agreement that we're looking at today do not deal with the academic performance. So there has not been a finding of a breach of an academic performance term. However, you are allowed to consider this factor when deciding what type of disciplinary action to take, whether you feel there should be a consent agreement or a revocation. It is a factor that, although is not a breach today, you may consider when deciding what type of disciplinary action you think the school that the board should place on the school. Length of time, the issue has been occurring for this school. Like I said, this consent agreement stemmed out of a non-compliance back in September of 2019. And then the consent agreement was put in place in February of 2020. So the consent agreement actually evolved out of a history of non-compliance. The charter holder's compliance with response to the board's investigation by providing necessary information and documentation. This particular charter school has been found, as we just discussed, to not have timely submitted their documentation due to the most recent interval review. Failure to timely submit documentation was also a non-compliance issue in at the September meeting, which led to this agreement. So the history of untimely submissions has led to the agreement and still continues. Whether there's misuse of funds, we don't have that issue here. There's been no finding of that, which is excellent. Any other factor that bears on the charter holder's ability and willingness to comply with its charter, other contractual agreements, or federal and state laws. So you are free during it's particularly something you might want to bring up during your question and answer period. How is the charter doing? Do you feel that they have someone in place that can make sure that they stay in compliance? I think as we are standing right now, the staff, or the Victory staff is the same staff that was at the school during the original non-compliance in September and continues to be the same leadership that is at the school today. So those are things you should take into consideration when you're looking at disciplinary action. Can we go to the next slide? Now I said one thing you can look at is the academic performance of the school. So although this was not an actual breach, a term that was breached, I did want to raise this because it is a consideration that you may take in deciding what disciplinary action to have. In the latest FY 2021 academic system review, board staff found the following. They look at the curriculum. In this case, they decided the curriculum did not meet standard. Things like the ELA and science curriculum was not aligned to state standards, which is a requirement of all schools, that your curriculum has to be aligned to the state standards passed and approved by the State Board of Ed. They were unable to show that their content area, their lesson plans, their skills that they were taught were not planned for the year. We want schools to plan. Schools should be planning with the standards in mind and an end goal of what these students should learn by the end of a quarter, by the end of the semester, by the end of the year, so that there is a goal. And we are teaching to that goal. We are teaching to that standard. So that needs to be planned and the path for that goal set ahead of time. They use what's called a life pack curriculum. And they use it for their 9th through 12th grade ELA and math. That curriculum is also not aligned with the state standards. So there is concern with the curriculum. The board staff also did a curriculum review, meaning they're looking at the process of adopting curriculum, how curriculum is reviewed to stay up to date and to align with standards. They found that there was not a systematic process to review and evaluate curriculum, which needs to be done periodically to stay current with state standards and current with the newest curriculum and knowledge out there. They failed to demonstrate a system to ensure curriculum is meeting the needs of the population. Schools are required to make sure that their curriculum meets those particular students that they are serving. Every school has a different population and a different makeup, and we want to make sure that your curriculum meets the needs of that particular population. We did not see that there was any process in place to ensure that. Monitoring instruction, this goes to monitoring the teacher's instruction, teacher evaluation, their process, observing teachers to make sure that students are achieving and meeting the standards. There was no documentation evidencing a teacher evaluation system. In fact, leadership stated that there was no formal process in place at the time. They failed to provide documentation of any type of formal, or that should be informal, observation system. So there's no system wherein teachers and staff are observed either formally or informally and receive an evaluation and feedback on how they're doing and what they could do to improve student learning. Now with assessment, this goes to assessing students and collecting data to see if our students are progressing and reaching those benchmarks and reaching those standards and those goals. They did and they do provide, they collect the data for student benchmarking purposes. So they are collecting data and they are conducting benchmark tests. However, there's not a complete assessment plan of how that data is used, how it's used in assessment, how it's used in evaluations. And there is also no indication that they use that data to create independent learning plans, particularly for students that are in the online system. And lastly, but they did meet the professional development section, which means they do have a good system for professional development, and it's aimed at, you know, student achievement and student outcomes. So that is definitely a positive for this school. So although academic systems is not a, like I said, not a breach, you are allowed to consider these when you're considering the type of disciplinary action that you would recommend the board take. As you can see, there's several areas in which the school did not meet and had issues with their curriculum and their academic systems. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So at the end, what the subcommittee is going to be determining at the end of this hearing is whether Victory has breached the terms and conditions of their 2020 consent agreement. The evidence that I presented to you today in considering those 4 breaches, evidence shows that Victory did breach those terms at the time of that interval review when they were observed. They were not in compliance with that consent agreement. Also, you will be recommending a disciplinary action to be taken by the full board. And like I said, these are the basically the 3 things that you can, items or actions that you can decide to take depending on your assessment of the school. Holding the 10%, revoking or entering into a consent agreement. Again, I would ask that you think about the history of the school, the repeated violations that they have had that led us here today. You can also look at the safety concern that we have with the repeated fingerprint violations, the repeated failure to be transparent with their board meetings and the minutes and their agendas, and just a delay in responding to the board or submitting the required documents that have been requested by a specified deadline. Those are the repeated issues we're looking at today that you can consider when you're looking at disciplinary action. Okay, can we have, I believe there's another slide.
Looks like that was the last one.
That's my last one. Okay. So the board staff's position is we would encourage you to, we believe you should find that Victory has breached the terms of the consent agreement. It is up to the discretion of the subcommittee what they would recommend as a disciplinary action to be taken. However, we do see that there has been repeated violations, some of them having to do with safety and health, failure to respond. So we feel that those are issues that need to be looked at in your determination. Okay, so I am available for questions, and board staff is also available. They may answer questions as well. I will answer them if I am the appropriate one to do that. If it's something specific to their interval review or what they actually observed, I may hand it off to a member of board staff to give you that detailed information.
Okay, I will go first if that's okay. Or actually, you know, board members, are there any, if you guys have any questions, you can definitely jump in before me. I just have a few for Vicky. Okay, I don't see anyone unmuting. So I just wanted to get a point of clarification on the F consent agreement.
Yes.
And I know you had that slide up and I just missed it. It was considered fulfilled, but was it only considered fulfilled because there was no letter grade?
Yes.
And it was my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that I thought with schools with an F consent agreement where there wasn't going to be a letter grade that we extended those contracts for 2 years.
We did when the time that this contract was drafted. We did not include those provisions because that whole COVID period was beginning. And as that COVID and we set in and we learned that letter grades may not be given, we have, for any consent agreements going forward, we have put that extension in. But
okay,
this agreement was signed prior to our doing that.
So it was not, okay, it wasn't retroactive. Yeah. And so do you know what the letter, do you know what the letter grade was after, like, the next issued letter grade that they had? Mary, would you be the person that would have that information, or Joanna?
Yeah, this is Joanna, Board Member Lee. So for the fiscal year 19, obviously most schools received the letter grades. This school did not receive a letter grade because they didn't have enough full academic year students in order to calculate that letter grade. So it was under that end count. Got it.
Okay. So we really, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just making a note really fast.
Good question.
Okay. And then as far as board staff's understanding of the teacher, or actually I have a different question. So for fingerprint clearance cards, all staff need a fingerprint clearance card. It's just a different, like, type of fingerprint clearance card depending on your interactions with students. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. Depending on your level of interaction, whether you have to have that identity verification. So there's just a different depending on your role and whether you're working with students or not.
Okay, so this did the, I think it was Miss Gonzalez was her last name?
Yes.
Did she have any sort of fingerprinting at all?
She had, and correct me, she had a fingerprint clearance card, but it was not IVP. So it was not identity verified.
Okay. And just for point of clarification, it was admitted at the time that she maybe tutored students. She was a para. Was there any sort of clarification to board staff at the time of what kind of her exact role was?
I would tell you what, and then if Joanna or Mary or someone wants to hop in, because they actually had that conversation with Victory staff, my understanding is that Victory reported that they have Spanish-speaking students. She's the only Spanish-speaking student or staff member at the school, so therefore she will go and work with students who are Spanish speakers. She will also deliver their packets, because it was during the shutdown, to the students, to their homes, and then, of course, provide instruction.
I will let Mary answer that, but what I will do is we did have a conversation with the charter holder, and they indicated that they provide that majority of their students are Hispanic students, and that the person that we're talking about was the only Spanish speaker there, but that was later after the actual site visit. And I think Mary can respond to that.
Yes, I further confirmed and asked for confirmation what her role was, and they stated she was an aide with the students, so she worked directly with the students.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming that the fingerprinting is more for like nightly custodial workers who have zero interactions with students but are on campus. That's more what that's used for? Is that correct?
Correct. If you are instructional, and particularly if you're with students unsupervised giving instruction, you're required to have that IVP. There are staff there, like you said, cafeteria workers, maintenance workers who don't necessarily interact or give instruction. They have a different level. They do not require to have that IVP.
Okay, so a maintenance worker if they're there during the school day, they don't have to have the IVP. They just have to be fingerprint checked.
Correct.
And then they just can't be alone in a room with a student.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Those were my questions. I just had just a few for you. So I don't know, Board Member Stratton or Close, did you guys have any questions for Vicki and before we turn it over to Victory?
No, I don't believe I do at this time. Very, very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
President Lee, I do have a couple of questions. I just want some clarification.
Please.
So there were two consent agreements. If I just want to make sure I have the dates right. Was it, were they March of 19 for, was that for the letter grade, and then February of 20 for the
Operational issues.
Operational performance expectations?
Yeah, the March 2019 was the the letter grade agreement, and that's all that was. And then the February 2020 dealt with the operational issues that we discussed today.
Okay, I have some more questions, but I think I can ask them later of the staff. All right, thank you.
President Lee, I do have one question. With respect to the consent agreement that we're dealing with now, the operational consent agreement, I'm new to the board, so I wasn't around when that was put into place. In addition to just making representations that the charter would not engage in any behavior that would violate, the operational framework, et cetera, did we have any other conditions in there relative to any sort of remedial action that the charter would take? And by that, I mean any sort of requirement that they bring out a consultant or legal advisor or anyone to help them through their operational struggles, or were we silent on that as a requirement in that particular consent agreement? Thank you.
This particular consent agreement was silent on that. We do have that in some of our consent agreements, but it was not in this particular one.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, I think that wraps up all of our questions. And so let me just get to the agenda item, but I'm sure that it's that Victory is up. So yes, okay, Vicki, thank you so much for that very thorough presentation, and board staff for all of your responses. So for now, what we will go ahead and move on to item F, which Victory High School. If at this time you will go ahead and unmute yourself. If you would state your names for the record prior to you giving your statement, that would be great. And then you guys have up to 1 hour as well for your presentation.
Good morning. This is Shirley Branham, principal, charter holder. My statement is 25 years we've been with the charter school board sponsoring us. However, the only time we've been notified is 2 times in 25 years. Ms. Medina and Ms. Compost came out in 2019, and they gave us a good review. Of course, we had the one person volunteering without any fingerprint. But at the time that they were here in 2019, Ms. Gonzalez was also working. And they knew what kind of fingerprint card she had simply because they asked for fingerprint cards. No one said anything about Ms. Gonzalez was invalid. Okay, today is the 5th time I've been before you in 3 months, trying my best to give you some information so that you would not punish the community that we serve. We have essential workers as parents. We have students that we have 100% bilingual Spanish-speaking students. And employees we have a few employees that's been with us forever, seem like it, within 8 to 10 years, and one in particular, 25 years. So we have a good record of providing our community. And I think I sent some information over saying how Victory High School is involved with the community. We have remained small simply because the parents were looking for small environments. And only God knows that I really am concerned with the violations. I think Attorney Bergen did an excellent job. It's so excellent until I'm saying, whoa, I never heard of that before. So we have not had any professional counseling in the program. And as I said, for 25 years, the charter school only intervened with us 2 times. And each year we have a valid auditor that comes into our school. He checks all the fingerprints. He checks all of the things that you're talking about. And we have received good marks. So we're out there battling by ourselves and thinking that we're flying colors, because no one has come to us in 25 years, for the exception of since 2019 and 2021. So I'm thinking, gee, we're doing great. The parents are thinking, we're doing great. We're going to send these kids to our school. It's small and they're happy. So that's what I have to say. And I will say, consider not punishing the community, the parents, the students, and most of all, the employees. We are a 4-day-a-week school, 144 days. Our staff have been with us this long. They're faithful. During this pandemic, I would be surprised if they could find another job. And I was advised on the 20th of May by Miss Ashley or Miss Bergen, I can't remember, that if you revoke the school, it will be effective June of this year. How in the world, and God only knows how all of us, you say that's just small people, but how in the world are they going to resurface in such a short time? And I'm now going to turn you over to Miss Deborah Murphy, who's our board member. Thank you.
Good morning, President Lee, members of the board, and the legal representation for the charter board. Thank you for having us this morning. And considering the 4 areas that were covered, the fingerprinting, Ms. Gonzalez did have a fingerprint card, which was approved during the prior audit. The information sent for the fingerprint card was submitted, I think, on March 17th, yes, and not May 17th, as your notes indicated on the slide. Be it that Ms. Gonzalez does not or has not ever worked with any students alone. I think the day that they visited, she was in the classroom with the math teacher, Mr. Zane. And when she goes out to deliver packets, she's with the assistant principal, Miss Jackson. So at no time is she interacting with students independently. And again, she did have a valid fingerprint card for classified staff and those who are not providing instruction. We know that it's an English only state, but we all understand that if you can explain something to students in their language to help them to be more successful, then that's to their advantage. Again, when she's having the conversations with the students and or families, she is not alone. She is with someone who had a valid IVP. On her fingerprint clearance card, the IVP number and the previous fingerprint card are both the same. So the fact that the IVP was submitted is something we'd like you to consider. And I'm only going to address the 4 issues that were concerned. The academic part that was mentioned, I'd like to not address that in this current appeal that we're making. The health and safety, even though it was fingerprint clearance card, there have been no violations of physical threat to health and safety on the campus. The historical repeating of incidents that were presented for timely submission, it appears that on March 17th from my conference with Dr. Branham and with Ms. Jackson, that all the materials were submitted on March 17th, I think, or was it February? March 17th. Within the 4 hours, all the information was presented, and that was on February 3rd, excuse me. And the last documentation was presented on March 17th.
Yes, as far as the minutes.
Though. As far as the minutes.
As far as the minutes, they were sent on February 3rd within 4 hours. Because we did not have a meeting on December 18th.
Okay, so this is, I'm sorry, please excuse me. So all of the information was submitted on February 3rd. The missing information for December 18th, 2019 was because there was no board meeting and it was posted on the website that there was no meeting. And on the January 30th,
those minutes were sent within the 4 hours.
Those minutes were included within the 4-hour window that they were to submit the information. So that is addressing the timely submissions. And the third thing that we looked at was the open meeting law. And there were several things. It was the members present or absent, the votes, the motions, the time and meeting place. For that particular incident, I am requesting an appeal and requesting technical support from the charter board. And we are also looking at interviewing and hiring someone to come in that would be able to handle all of our board meetings and some other things, some other logistical things here on campus as far as paperwork. So our appeal for that would be for technical support for the open meeting law guidelines and regulations to ensure compliance in future meetings, notices, agendas, and minutes that Victory High School is in compliance. The mission statement, from my understanding, it was posted on the charter school board. However, you're saying on the day of your visit that it was not listed on the Victory High School website.
It was not in alignment.
And so the alignment, again, we want to, I think the statement that you read at first that was on the charter board website or the one we had submitted, that is our actual mission statement. So we want to make sure that that is correct on our website. And we do have someone here who is going to be helping with technical support with technology. That would include the website for Victory High School and also dashboard technical support. So we do need some technology support in that effort.
The mission, it has been amended with the charter board.
Okay.
This is Jackie Jackson, the assistant principal. Excuse me for interrupting Ms. Murphy. I was trying to explain to her that as far as the mission statement, it has gone through amendment request and it has been approved. So the amendment is in line. As far as all of the non-compliance issues, they have been brought into alignment as of March 17th. There were no board minutes. There just was a cancellation notice on our website showing that the December 18th board meeting was canceled due to a family problem. And all of the other things, the timely submission, everything was sent. I cannot understand why it wasn't sent, but within the 4 hours on February 3rd, I did send the meeting notices from our website showing that December 18th meeting was canceled, and the minutes for January 3rd were in that within the 4-hour window. Ms. Murphy, may continue.
And Ms. Murphy is here again.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And again, President Lee and the members of the board, what we're saying here is that in the 25 years of existence, just in the February 2019 consent agreement, and then the second one, there were some findings. And for that, we truly understand that you had those findings. What we're requesting is the consultants or technical support provided by the charter board to help us to remain in compliance and to remain open. The revocation is what we're really appealing, is that we do not want the school closed for the compliance issues that were stated today. I covered the information about the fingerprint clearance card with Ms. Gonzalez having a current card that was never found out of compliance by the various yearly audits, and the fact that she has a current IVP card with the same, actually the number for the IVP card and her other fingerprint clearance card were the same. She does not participate in providing instruction or educational opportunities independent. She is always supervised by a certified and person that has an IVB card. So we're asking today is that when you're considering a decision, that you consider the longevity of Victory High School. We'd also like the 2-year extension to be noted for the letter grade F and that it's retroactive. We'd also like to request technical support to help with compliance of the open meeting law guidelines and also with the governing board meeting and with the dashboard with the charter school, so that we can learn all of the ways that we can operate with the dashboard, how to submit amendments if we need to. And so today we're really just coming to ask that you consider not revoking the license, that we would continue to be operating and that we have the opportunity to meet the, and correct for my understanding, and I think Ms. Bergen mentioned that all of the items that were mentioned are now in compliance, but that doesn't negate the fact that there was a non-compliance issue. So currently we are in compliance and we would like to continue to remain an open high school, and we would like to have the technical support and consultants that Charter Board has available, or if you'd like to give us a list of names that we can look at, and that we're able to make those corrections and move forward and continue to provide education for the South Phoenix community. Are there any questions that you have for us?
Thank you guys for that presentation. Board members, I will go ahead and have it go to you guys first. Do you have any questions for Victory High School?
Yes, I have a question. How many students are you currently serving today?
Yes, as of today, we have 22 students. And like Dr. Branham said, we remain small because the students and the parents like it to be small. Most of our students come from the larger schools around us, Cesar Chavez, Betty Fairfax, and they come to us because they do not feel comfortable in that arena or in a large school, or they have been bullied. We've had several kids come from Cesar Chavez who have been jacked in the bathrooms. And if you don't know what that means, they get assaulted by gang members in their bathrooms. So when they come to Victory, they feel safe. And that's why we stay small.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions. So when you guys were here before the board before, one of the big things we asked you, because if I recall, there was discussion about whether to go straight to the intent to revoke or provide a consent agreement option for this school. And one of the questions that we always ask is, what is your plan? So you're not here before us again. It sounds like the staff is the same. I don't know that there's been trainings. It sounds like, you know, it's specifically for the violations that are repeat violations, for example, the open meeting law. So I hear now what you're saying is, hey, we're going to bring somebody in and help us with open meeting laws. But we had this conversation back when we did the consent agreement the first time. And so specifically, not what are you going to do, but what have you done since we first established the consent agreement until now?
What have we done
to make sure that you're not here, you know, to stay in operational compliance?
President Lee, thank you for that question. Currently, Victory High School has, since we had the compliance issues, we are making sure that the minutes are up to date and they have all the components that we're missing. We're posting our meetings on the website and making sure that the public is aware of the time, the place, and the location of the meetings. And if they want to attend, it is an open meeting so that they can attend. As far as the minutes, they have been restructured, kind of a template to make sure that we're including all those components so that we take attendance, each person is able to say they're present. We're also making sure that we have the minutes and the agendas have the time of the meeting, the date, and the location, and that the agenda items are complete, showing future meetings and the notes that were taken during the meeting, including any motions that were made. So we have made those corrections with our current board meetings. We took that into compliance, and we have been applying those corrections.
Right, but you've had issues. I mean, board meeting. Sorry, and let me clarify because I don't think I was super clear. So I apologize. Since this consent agreement was signed, so I'm talking back in February of 2020, because you specifically had open meeting violations in February of 2020, and you're before us here again today with open meeting, or I know you're in compliance now, but the reason why you're back here is because you weren't in compliance with open meeting violations. So my question is what did you do in February 2020 to get professional development, ensure compliance, hire someone to come in? Like, why? So the actions that you're talking about now sound great, but why did that not happen in February of 2020 when you were put on the consent agreement?
Yes, President Lee, those things were done. We did not have the funds to hire someone, but yes, I did get the information on the open meeting law. As far as I was concerned, and as far as the minutes I was writing, the information is there. I went through the same minutes and I highlighted everything. I did not send it back, but the information that is said to be missing is in there. It may not be formatted in a way that can be seen, but all of the information is there. We have, as you see, we are the board, the three of us right here. And so the information is on there, who's in attendance. And yes, I may not have formatted it correctly, but I have been putting all of that information in there. And that is from the 2020 consent agreement. I have been following the information that was sent to me from Ms. Medina. She asked me to go on the OMB or the OBM website, and I did download that information, and I have been following it to the best of my ability.
So is it your claim, just to clarify what you just stated, so is it your claim that on all of the board meeting minutes, and I'm just going over what the violations were really fast, sorry, hold on one second. So it's your claim that you, on all of those, you did record member attendance, you did record board votes, you did state what the motions were, you did include the meeting times, you stated the time and place, and the board minutes were aligned to the agenda items. So that's your statement, is that you did have all those pieces in there?
Yes. Yes, President Lee. Yes, all of those items are in there, but like I say, the format may not be, it may not say roll call and then have all the names there, but it does have the names in the minutes of who's going, who's there. It does have all of the information that was said was missing.
I'm going to let board staff just comment on that because there seems to be some conflicting information. So if we could have board staff maybe or Vicky respond to that because they're saying that they had information in there.
I have a statement about the board meeting. We've been trying to recruit board members.
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me let board staff just respond to that and then absolutely we'll continue. Yeah, we want to make sure we hear everything you guys have to say. So
I believe, Joanna, can we pull up those documents and take a look at them? Which of the board minutes do we need to look at just to make sure she pulls up the right one?
I can take a look, and I'm looking at the ones that were noted for violations, October 1st, 2020.
Okay, I'll look.
20. You're taking a look.
Sorry, I didn't hear which ones you're looking at. We want to look at the same meeting notices as well. I mean, the minutes.
Mary, when you identify one, I can pull it up.
Okay.
Oh, we're going to see it on the screen.
So what is the date that we need to look at that you say contains the information boards
so October, let me go ahead and run the list. So October 1st, 2020.
October 1st.
Okay.
July 6th, 2020.
Okay.
June 18, 2020.
Okay.
And October 3rd, 2019.
Okay, I'm going to start with October 1st.
Okay, Ms. Jackson is pulling our notebook. And from my understanding, we're looking at October 1st, 2020.
Here we go. Here's the
July 6th, 2020. July 18th, 2020. And October 3rd, 2019. Is that correct?
I believe it was June 18th, 2020 is what my notes said.
Okay.
But Mary, can you
Okay, you said July, so it's June 6th, 2020? June 6th?
June 8th. No, it was July 6th, but June 18th. Is that correct, Mary?
That's correct.
Okay, so July 6th, 2020, but June 18th of 2020.
Okay.
And it looks like you have the October 1.
The October 1st is on the screen.
June 18th of 2020.
And are these the complete minutes?
Joanna, this is Rachel. Those are not the minutes. That's the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, but was the agenda one of the items that was mentioned to be out of compliance?
July 27th, but we don't have a July 18th.
It's June 18th and July 6th.
Okay,
Joanna, it's the one in the folder called Copy of Victory High School AFR Board Meeting, October 1, 2020.
Okay, yep, just found it. Thank you.
President Lee and the board, we are getting the same notes here, and we have October 1st.
No. Is that July 16th?
No, July 6th. I'm sorry. Okay, so did we want to address the October 1st?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I might just kind of walk through this really fast. Okay. So, and we'll just go through what the violations were. So I do not see any member attendance recorded on here. Is that accurate? I mean, can you agree to that?
I think she's looking at the fact that she did the roll call, but it does not say who was absent or who was in attendance.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So the member attendance was not listed. Okay. So the board votes. It doesn't appear that there are any board votes on here. It does say who motioned and who seconded from what I can see, but there's no actual voting.
It has
listed.
Here, it says motion to accept meeting minutes and agenda were requested by Ms. Jackson and second by Dr. Branham. Dr. Branham voted to accept the minutes and agenda. Ms. Jackson voted to accept the minutes and agenda.
Were there only 2 board members?
Yes.
Okay, so that's probably why roll call is really important, because I thought it was a 3-member board.
It is a 3-member board, but at this meeting, there were only 2 individuals present.
Okay, so now you can understand probably why it needs to be listed, because according to this, we have no idea from reading this if the board member absent abstained. So we really don't know what the vote was. I mean, do you understand? Does that make sense?
It does. I can see where that would be valid as far as not knowing the attendance, but the motion and the who voted are current or present on here.
And I don't see the meeting time listed. I see that it was called to order at 2 p.m. I don't know if we go to our council or to Vicky as far as council, is that considered the time or listed where it gives a start time?
Unmute myself, hold on. Are we talking, is this the minutes?
Yes, these are the minutes.
Okay. For the minutes, it's probably sufficient. However, for your agenda, you need to state the planned time for it to start.
Make sure it was called over.
Right, and I see here that we do have the time that the meeting was called to order and when it was adjourned, but absolutely on the agenda, the time is missing.
Yes. Okay, and so that would be the most important place for the time, because obviously people can't attend if there's no time listed. So there was a violation there. Okay, so I'm not going to keep going through them I just wanted to get clarification.
On here, it's no time. Okay.
Yeah, so I just want, and the agenda, right, is where the public is going to view is what you post, so the public can attend. So I just wanted to get clarification. So here's, and then, so you mentioned about paying for someone to do this, and the reason why you didn't do that before is because you didn't have the funds. So how do you have the funds now? Because when I looked up your average teacher salary, you're paying your teachers $20,000, which seems extreme. I don't know how you're finding a teacher. I know you cite that it's part-time, but Monday through Thursday from 8:30 to 2:30 is very close to full-time for a teacher. You're talking about one day, 4 out of the 5 days is 4/5. And I would argue at worst, a teacher's salary should hopefully be no lower than around $40,000, and 4/5 of, just doing some rough math. It's really low what you guys are paying teachers. That's not why you're here. So we don't necessarily need to get into that.
We need to address that. Okay.
But so where are the monies coming from now?
We have the funds that are in our operation budget. We do have the funding available to hire another part-time person who would just be able to help us with our meeting and board meetings and other meetings that we're scheduling. It would be a part-time position. It's not a full-time position.
Sure. And so why didn't you have the funds before then?
The funding was available. We didn't think that we were in violation. So the items that you have brought to our notice, those are items that we want to correct. And
except that you knew you were in violation because that's what got you on the consent agreement. So in the first place, back in February 20. So you did know that you had violations that you were unaware of. So why didn't you hire the part-time person at that time?
We didn't feel that we needed to have someone, but after going through this process, the meeting we had on May 10th, and with this meeting, when we sat and listened to Ms. Bergen and the detail that she went through, it's important to us that we have someone who clearly understands the open meeting laws and all the requirements so that we're not in this predicament again.
Okay.
So we are trying to make the correction, and it wouldn't be a full-time position. It's a part-time position because we only meet monthly.
Sure. And then the only thing, and I may have missed it, so I apologize if I did, that I don't think I heard a response to was the changing in mission statement. I'm a little, and I know actually you did respond to it. I just want to maybe get clarification. Let me tell you what I think, what I think I heard, and then you can absolutely correct me. Okay. So it's my understanding that you guys did adopt a new mission statement, kind of the shorter, more concise mission statement that was listed on the website. Is that correct? It had something about preparing students for a changing world is what I think it was. That's close. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry, that is correct. And we're using that statement, and we did process the amendment for that change.
And when did you make that change officially as a board?
President Lee, when Ms. Catrano, Mary came out, that's when we noticed, that's when we were informed that the mission statement was not in alignment. In 2019, when we did our program of instruction, we were not told that our mission statement was not in alignment. The one on our website has been there for a while. So we always had the two. One is just a smaller version. And so it was never really changed until 2021.
Okay.
So like I said, in 2019, when Miss Medina came out, it was the same thing at that time.
Okay. So do you have board minutes showing that? Okay. 2021 is when your board minutes are shown with the shorter approved. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes,
and when, okay. So it wasn't until the finding happened. Okay. I see.
Correct.
And then,
yeah, excuse me. We were unaware that it was a problem because in 2019, it was not a problem.
Sure. Okay. Okay, I'm actually gonna go to some board members to see if they have any questions, and then I might have a few more. So go ahead and Member Stratton or Member Close, did you guys have any further questions for Victory?
Sure, I've got a couple of questions for the folks at Victory. This is a very difficult situation because you know, on one hand, I do acknowledge that you all are serving a very vulnerable and underrepresented community. And so the last thing that I as a board member want to do is to have to consider shutting down a school. On the other hand, we have to make sure that our schools are running in the best possible way and certainly consistent with state statute and regulation. And I do recognize, any one of these on their own, someone might be able to say, well, this is just a small item, it's just nitpicking, but it is a statutory requirement. And what is most troubling to me seems to be a repeating pattern of noncompliance. And we owe it to our kids to have well-functioning schools that operate within the bounds of the regulations. And we have to be fair in our application of those regulations and holding schools accountable. We have to be fair to you, and we have to be fair to the other charter schools that are doing a better job, frankly, of following the rules, if you will. And so what I'm especially interested in hearing is, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings about these particular violations, and what specifically are you doing other than just, saying that you'll hire someone? I don't even know if you have to necessarily bring on a full-time person. I mean, I think you could address a lot of these things if you had a competent consultant and legal counsel coming in to help you. And I don't think that takes a ton of resources. It's probably cheaper than hiring somebody and increasing your head count. So I'm kind of scratching my head on this one because you all seem like very nice people that are running a good school and trying to help the community, but I don't know if you just don't take these things seriously and you're not putting the resources in, if you don't know about the requirements. But I'm interested in hearing from you, like, what went wrong? Why are you back before us again? And how seriously do you take these things, and what's the commitment to making sure that we're not in this position again if we were to explore something like that? So I know that's kind of a lot, but I just would like to hear a little bit more from you all on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton, President Lee, and members of the board. I certainly agree that there has been, and I don't think we're contesting the findings. What we're trying to say is that we're taking a new approach and a new look at what the compliance were, why we haven't been in compliance, why are those items missing? We've reflected on that. And so now we're trying to move forward to make those corrections. I certainly agree that hiring someone, it wouldn't be a full-time person, as I've stated, is something we have to consider as far as the cost. The reason that you're looking at this is because they're repeated, is what from my understanding of what you just stated. And as we are looking at our minutes, even just now, we're looking at on some of them, the time was missing, some of them it was there. So it's an inconsistency, and it could be a result of individuals wearing several hats at the school and not really taking a fine look at the finished product. So we understand that we were in non-compliance. We understand and accept that, and we're willing to move forward to make the corrections. And that's where we are today. And knowledge is great. We looked at the open meeting law guidelines, and we're going to, as I mentioned before, we're going to create a template for our meetings and our agendas. So it's just making those improvements that we need to make to stay in compliance.
Okay, thank you. One last question. From the time of the first consent agreement, have any of you all gone through any sort of professional development training on operational framework or open meetings laws or any sort of governance issues? Has anyone at the school at least signed up for a Zoom webinar or anything to try to address that issue?
In 2019, the assistant principal, Ms. Jackson, did participate in a training. Our professional development over this past 2019 through school year 2021 has focused on professional development and how to upgrade our teachers. I shouldn't say upgrade, to inform our teachers so that we can increase in our academic success. So a lot of our professional development has been focused on improving teaching and learning here at Victory High School. So that's why we're looking at this very serious and asking for technical support from the charter board, and as well as if we find someone who this is their area of expertise. So we're not fighting that. We're just saying, how can we improve and what steps can we do to improve? And not saying that it's minor, but there are areas that we're doing well in with our students. And we want to improve on the open meeting laws. And I think that is when I look at the timely submission, the open meeting laws, I think those are the two that we're really working on to improve. The fingerprint clearance issue has been, like you said, it was corrected, although it was non-compliant. And then the mission statement amendment has been approved. So we're looking for assistance to help us to remain in compliance.
So one of the things that I've heard come up a couple of times that you've raised is you've indicated you want technical assistance from the charter board. I'm not sure we are in a position to give the technical assistance. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I know there's, the Charter Association, for example, offers a lot of training. They just had a training session just last week, and I know they covered some operational things there at their session. What do you mean by operational support or technical support from the charter board? Help me understand.
Okay, I thought there were members that were available to come out and provide, or if we even, by Zoom meetings or having conversations on noting the improvement that's being made, or again, the trainings that are maybe suggested, specific trainings that you think that would be beneficial for us to attend that the charter board offers.
For example, did you guys sign up for the Charter Association training last week? Did anybody go to that, or were you aware of that?
No, we did not. Ms. Jackson is saying she didn't receive the notification.
See, those are the types of things that would make it easier for, certainly, I'm not going to speak for the other board members, but certainly for me, that's the type of activity that I would like to see, to show a commitment and a demonstration to the board that that Victory takes these things seriously and are looking for ways to improve. And it's not just this charter association. I know that there are other groups. I don't know, Ashley or staff, if our charters also take advantage of the ASBO trainings. And I know there are other organizations as well, not just the Charter Association, although they do a great job. But that's really the kind of training I think that, you know, that I would like to see. There's some wonderful programs there that touch on these issues. So I would urge you, you know, to take advantage of that, and certainly we'll be talking more about that once we conclude the hearing. But
okay, Mr. Stratton, President Lee, in my appeal, that is what I'm requesting. And if there are, we can have another consent that we would put those items in and provide certification or certificates that we've attended, or even, I don't know how you would be able to know that we've attended those meetings, but that would be something I would like to see in a consent agreement, that we attend the professional development, not for teaching and learning, but for operations.
So Board Member Stratton, and just, well, not to you directly, but to really just in general, you know, we aren't here today, in my opinion, to just for a first time or even a second time consent agreement. You know, we're here today for violation of a consent agreement. And I'm having a really, you know, to be clear, that there was a violation, even if we took off anything that was somewhat contested, right? Like fingerprint clearance card, if we threw that out of the table, if we threw all of these things out, it's clear that the open meeting law, you know, was proved that that was a consistent violation. And what's concerning about that is the word consistent, is that there are open meeting violation laws in the prior, and to come the first time around. And I remember being here and saying, what are you guys going to do? And you had the plan and you were going to do the things. And then to realize that you guys haven't, to me, is gross misconduct. It's not, you know, we're not here today to design I mean, obviously an option is to do another consent agreement. To me, though, when you go through what we're supposed to consider, the capacity, the funds, you guys have 22 students. That's not a lot of students. That's not a lot of money. You have 2 administrators. You have a teacher that you're paying $20,000. I mean, board members, I just, to me, there's, if we're here, and I believe board staff can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only consent agenda that we've ever had to come back to for somebody at this point for violating again. When you get put on a consent agenda, that should be the wake-up call. That's the wake-up call where you start finding the part-time people, where you reach out to the board staff and say, listen, I don't know where to go. If you guys don't do it, get me help. We have 3 people here. We need help. And you guys are our charter operator, or, you know, you guys are who we have the contract with, and we need your help. And I didn't see you guys banging. I don't have the evidence of you guys banging down our doors, or even asking one time to say, hey, we need the help. Where we're at now is, you've been on the consent, you violated the consent. And so now we're supposed to trust that you're going to do all those things. And so you know, board members, I have a really hard time with this. We're not in a situation where they've done what they should have done when being put on the consent agenda in the first place. You know, I could ask questions about each item, but at the end of the day, the reality is, I think that the board staff, Vicki, has proven that there's been a violation. So I don't think that's in question. So I'm not sure that that's super relevant for me, at least, to spend a lot of time on. The question for me, you know, those relevant factors, I think was a really succinct way of putting it, is you know, especially kind of those other factors of, are they capable of complying? Do they have someone in place to make sure that they have someone in charge of compliance? The answer is no. You know, you guys aren't coming here saying, hey, we've already hired a part-time person. This is what we're doing. We're being proactive. We're ready for this meeting. I know if this was my school, you know, a school that, you know, I was in charge of, I'd say, hey, we've already hired the part-time person. This is what we're doing. And unfortunately, because I don't have evidence of that being successful before, while I appreciate your guys' heart and your guys' mission, I truly believe that your guys' heart is in education and for those students. That is in no way in question to me at all. Unfortunately, what is in question, what I think has been proven consistently, is the ability to operate. I can't comment on why things haven't been caught in the past. All I can comment on is what happens now and what has consistently happened now. And so, you know, board members, I just want to be really clear with kind of where I'm at and kind of what I've seen up until this point, and do want to remind board members that we are not here for a first consent item. We're really here for the violation of the consent agreement, which everybody knew going into it really meant that revocation would happen. So board members, are there any other questions for
President Lee? Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, and I appreciate your comments. Yeah. Because, and I like specifically your comment about how you can't address what happened in the past. That's what I was referring to earlier, and then the staff at Victory kind of brought it up, in that this school, this charter has been in existence for 25 years, 24 years before the first violations of the operational performance expectations were found. And I guess maybe I don't want to assume anything, but I'm trying to figure out why nothing was found before that. A lot of these violations, the fingerprint violation concerns me. It was remedied, but it does concern me. Given the number of staff that there were over the number of years, there weren't that many staff. So it would be a high percentage of the staff that were not fingerprinted, if you're looking at percentages. The open meeting laws, the compliance, you know, those seem like easy solutions. And I'm concerned that they weren't found and exercised immediately. I agree with board member Stratton that I think you don't need to hire extra people. I think you could probably find somebody to do it pro bono, just come in and provide you a template and make sure that it proceeds forward if that was the course of action we were to take. But I'm trying to figure out why no violations were found before February 2020. Because I think maybe, and then again, I don't want to assume, but I'm speculating here, but that the school may have just been operating in its own little bubble there for 24 years. And they should have taken the consent agreement, our specific consent agreement for the operational performance expectations, as a wake-up call. But I'm torn, because I think that all of these issues could be remedied easily, and I'm curious why they weren't found before, and then why they weren't taken care of in the last year. So those are my comments right now.
Board member Stratton, did you have any other final comments? I mean, just to be clear, you guys, I'm ready to make a motion. I don't know if we have to meet in executive session just to come up with motion language, but
President Lee,
yes,
if I might add a little bit to the conversation based on Member Close's comments. One of the comments that Victory has made is that, you know, staff hadn't really been to their school until when Joanna and Serena conducted their visit. But with that being said, I've been doing a little digging into the system, and they were in interval review back in 2016. Our process in 2016 looked very different. We did not go out and visit schools, but we did notify schools of their interval review requirements, and that included academic submission requirements as well as operational submission requirements. At that time, their board was found to be out of alignment and they were required to submit to board staff to clean up those issues. So that's one time that board staff did have contact with them to let them know there were pending issues. Additionally, when board staff conducted that huge review of enrollment documents in schools back in 2018, 2019, they were notified of enrollment violations. So I want to be very clear that this is not the first, 2020 was not the first time that those violations have been found. We've been finding these violations a little at a time over the years, but as we've ramped up our reviews of schools, we're having more and more violations. So I think on some level, Member Close is correct. They kind of did operate in a bubble, but I think in looking at that track record over the past 5 years, which is kind of what I can access in the system at this time, this is what I'm seeing is there, there's been this thing, and then there's been this additional thing, and then this additional thing. So I think, and we've had a lot of communication out to our charters about our increased reviews and increased expectations. And in conjunction with that, lots of information in our newsletters about those increased reviews and what we're looking for. Our interval review guidance was more comprehensive this year than it ever has been before to try to set charters up for as much success as possible with that process. So I just want to kind of address that this wasn't the first time they've had findings. There have been findings in the past through various processes that have been noted in our system.
And if I may just add to what Rachel said, just to clarify the 2019 review, that was not an interval review. That was a targeted review, and that was based off of them being placed in a consent agreement under the accountability consent agreement or the letter grade agreement. So that review is going to look quite a bit different than Rachel's team's interval review. So it is very likely that the same findings that Rachel's team found in that interval review would not have been reviewed during that targeted visit as well. And Rachel is very accurate in the fact that we did ramp up the interval reviews this past year, but with that, we did provide additional assistance and additional support and guidance to our schools. So we have been putting out a pretty lengthy enrollment guidance document to assist schools. We did put out an interval review guide as well. And that interval review guide did go through many of the different compliance issues that Rachel's team, in particular, Mary, did review when they did their interval review.
Thank you, Ashley and Rachel, for that.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank them for the comments as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, board members, this is really a discussion of what do we do when charters violate consent agreements? At the end of the day, there was a violation of a consent agreement. There is not evidence showing that they, in my opinion, gave their best effort to stay in compliance with that consent agreement. And so to then come and say, well, we'll offer you now another consent agreement, to me, really takes the teeth out of putting a consent agreement in the first place. I think that's a terrible and inconsistent precedent to set, to be, just to be clear. That's, I guess, where I'm at. So
I'm ready to discuss language. Do we need to move into executive session?
Do we, should we just, let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and move into executive session. So just so Victory High School knows, we'll jump off just for a second. This will stay open. We're just going into a breakout room and we will come right back. It should be pretty quick.
Thank you very much.
President Lee.
President Lee, you're muted.
So sorry. I did that wrong. I got overzealous when I saw the button for the breakout room. So we actually need a motion to move into executive.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. And Aaron, will you do the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Sorry about that. Vice President Close.
Yes.
Timothy Stratton.
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And then we will just wait one more time for, you'll get a notification for a breakout room, and it was set up and I messed that up. So it'll just be a minute, guys. I think actually if you just hit more, oh, there it is.
Go.
Okay. All right. So we are back. Aaron, if you could please do a quick roll call. I just want to make sure that all members are back from executive session. I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. Vice President Close.
Here.
Mr. Stratton.
Here.
President Lee.
Here.
All are present.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I just have one question, and I believe I asked this, but I don't know if the answer officially went on the record. Vicki, can you confirm that this is the first violation of a consent agreement where we've had this hearing?
Yes, it is. This is the first time we've had a breach of a consent agreement that we had to go to a hearing for.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, board members, are there any other questions? And if not, is there a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, Vicki, can you please put up the slide, or Joanna, whoever does that? We would like to look at the slide listing the 4 violations. I believe there was a slide that had 1 page with the 4 violations listed on it succinctly.
Yeah, let me get that ready.
Okay, thank you.
And Board Member Lee, while we're waiting, I just have one comment. And I guess I would ask, are we going to, will we have opportunity to discuss the motion before we vote on it, or should we have that discussion now? I guess.
You would always, in my opinion, and Deborah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we should definitely have discussion before voting versus, during voting, because then votes have been made. So if you have anything that you'd want to say, now is probably the best time to do it prior to a vote.
Okay. Well, I mean, my only consideration or comment would be, again, to reiterate that this is a very unfortunate situation, and it's a very difficult situation because I think, looking at the nature of these violations, with the exception of fingerprinting, which is obviously of paramount concern, it's not like we have a finding of, financial impropriety or something like that. So it's unfortunate that such, I'll deem, administrative items could result in the revocation of the charter here. So I'm still struggling with this one in terms of what the appropriate remedy is. I do undoubtedly believe there are several instances of non-compliance here, including a violation of the consent agreement, which is very troubling. But I am also wrestling with the nature of the violations, the fact that they have been brought into compliance, and the significant and real impact upon families and students of closing a school. It's not something that I think any of us take lightly. So just wanted to go on the record with that statement.
Thank you, Member Stratton.
President Lee, I have put the slide presentation up. However, we have a slide for each
one.
Yes.
Okay. Member Close, I'm going to have her go through these slides, and then will you just tell her when to go to the next one?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that before the motion?
Let me see.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I got this one. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Next slide.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yes, please. Okay, I've got this as well. Okay, next slide. All right, next slide. Okay.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Okay. With that, then, Mr. Close, are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, I don't make this lightly, but we are in this situation. And so I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the board, the Arizona State Board for Charter Schools, that the charter for Victory High School be revoked based on the 4 breaches of the consent agreement presented to us, specifically the first breach being the mission statement not being in alignment with the state website. Is that correct? Second breach being the fingerprinting of staff and maintaining and making sure that the appropriate fingerprint clearance cards were completed and on file. And the third breach being of the open meeting laws, the Arizona State open meeting laws. And the fourth breach being a compliance issue with a timely submission of information to the board.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Member Stratton. Aaron, could you do the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Vice President Close.
Aye.
Mr. Stratton.
Aye.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Members from Victory High School, thank you so much for being here. The board will reach out to you while this is not, and I don't know if I should be the person saying this, but this isn't the final decision. This will then go before the board at a special board meeting that we will have in, Ashley or Vicky, can you confirm that we will have this board meeting in June to finalize either this motion, or the board could still take a different direction?
Presently, my hope is that we would have a special board meeting sometime in June to consider this item along with some other items as well.
Okay. Okay, Victory High School, if you have any questions about this or the process moving forward, please reach out to the charter board. Ashley will definitely make herself available, or whoever from board staff will make themselves available if you have any questions. But with that, then we are adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we're to contact Ashley with any questions as far as how we can make another appeal with the board meeting.
Ashley, what's the best way for them to reach the board staff or you?
You can go ahead and email me and we'll be in contact with next steps.
Okay, and my question is, are we able to appeal the motion that was just made to revoke the license?
The next opportunity for you to address the board would be at its next board meeting, which it would consider the subcommittee's recommendation.
Okay, so then there isn't another appeal.
This is a recommended decision by the subcommittee. Their recommendation will go before the full board. Okay. At which time the full board can make a reconsideration. They get the final decision. This is only a recommended decision. The full board will make the final decision. At that time that it goes before the full board, you will have the opportunity to speak.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.